Ukraine's F-16 pilots are training in the UK right now, and the most important thing they're learning has nothing to do with the aircraft. British instructors are teaching Ukrainian pilots to make decisions the way NATO pilots make decisions. Now, that sounds obvious, but it's not obvious, and Russia is about to find out why. Once in a while, a story comes through that looks like hardware news on the surface, but it's actually something much deeper underneath. Two recent reports from Business Insider on Ukraine's F-16 training program in the UK are exactly that. Yes, Ukrainian pilots are learning to fly a Western fourth-generation fighter. That's not news. But they're also learning to think like Western fighter pilots. Those are very different skills, and right now that difference isn't getting nearly enough attention. So today we're going to go inside the RAF training pipeline, the GPS-denied flying, the Soviet command culture problem, and the one capability that Russia's electronic warfare, for all its sophistication, genuinely cannot touch. I can picture the RAF squadron commander now. Congratulations, Your Majesty, those Ukrainians are dynamite. Hey friends, Wes here, Army and Air Force veteran, defense journalist, and former E3 AWACS radar nerd. Radar love, baby. So Ukrainian trainees in the UK are being taught low-altitude flying without relying on satellite navigation because Russian electronic warfare has made GPS unreliable across vast stretches of Ukrainians' battle space. One Ukrainian trainee described learning to use rivers, mountains, and terrain features during training sorties, calling it really important. Well, that sounds basic until you picture what it actually requires. You're at low altitude, enemy air defenses are actively hunting you, your radio may be cluttered or jammed, your cockpit is processing and throwing enormous volumes of information at you simultaneously, and instead of following a blue line on a moving map, you're identifying a river bend you memorized from a paper chart 2 hours ago and counting the seconds to the next checkpoint. The FAA defines pilotage as navigation by visible landmarks and dead reckoning as navigation by calculation, course, time, speed, distance, and wind correction. Western pilots, including U.S. Air Force pilots, are still taught both as backup skills, but in Ukraine, they're primary skills. GPS failure in combat means potentially losing positional awareness entirely. A weapon misses its target, a formation separates, your aircraft drifts into an air defense envelope that punishes inattention with a missile. So the pre-flight isn't just checking weather and fuel, it's studying legs, headings, expected times, terrain features, waypoints, threats, emergency options, rivers, coastlines, ridgelines, railways, towns. The pilot builds a mental map and then flies against it, comparing what should be outside the canopy to what actually is, while simultaneously managing airspeed, altitude, heading, fuel, formation position, and the threat picture. At low altitude, that workload runs at 5 times normal cognitive speed. The ground comes up fast, waypoints arrive before you're ready, a few degrees of heading errors compounded over several minutes can put you miles from where you think you are. This is brain surgeon level cognitive discipline dressed up as navigation. Now, the F-16 isn't helpless when GPS goes down. The first fallback is the inertial navigation system, or INS. Unlike GPS, which depends on satellites 20,000 kilometers above Earth, INS is entirely self-contained. Accelerometers and gyroscopes track motion from a known starting point. Russia can't jam it because there's nothing to jam. It doesn't listen to the outside world, it just watches itself. The bad news is that INS drifts. Small errors compound over time, typically 1 to 2 nautical miles per hour of flight. Manageable on short missions, but over an extended sortie in complex terrain, it's the kind of error that starts small and puts you somewhere you didn't plan to be. The second fallback to GPS is the TACAN, or the Tactical Air Navigation System. Think of it as the military version of the civilian radio beacon VOR, except more capable and harder to fool. A TACAN ground station broadcasts a signal giving you bearing and distance. You're this far from that station in that direction, and from that, a trained pilot can fix position on a chart and update their dead reckoning. It works. It's been working since the Korean War, but the vulnerability is that TACAN stations are fixed, known locations. They can be targeted. They can be suppressed or simply absent in the part of the Ukraine where you need them most. The third option is the aircraft's own APG-68 radar, which has a ground mapping mode. That can paint a picture of the terrain below. A pilot who knows the route can compare what the radar shows against what the map says should be there. It's slow, it consumes mental bandwidth, and active radar emissions are detectable in a contested environment, so it's a tool, not a solution. But the whole point of the F-16's navigation fusion architecture is to squeeze maximum accuracy out of whatever combination of INS, TACAN, radar fixes, and visual references the pilot currently has access to. The system is designed to keep a coherent picture of its position even as individual inputs degrade or disappear completely. One of the things the AWACS platforms does extremely well is take a chaotic, contested airspace and organize it into something coherent. The E3 carries a pulse-off radar with an unclassified range of roughly 400 kilometers, tracking hundreds of airborne contacts simultaneously. It doesn't rely on GPS for its core radar function. It's an airborne command post with a god's eye view of the battle, and one of its jobs is telling fighter pilots exactly where they are, where the threats are, and what to do about both. In a GPS-denied environment, an AWACS controller can vector a disoriented pilot back to their correct position faster than the pilot can sort it out from terrain features alone. I've seen it happen. For most of this war, Ukrainian pilots have been flying on fragmented situational awareness, stitched together from ground radars, voice radio, and whatever their own sensors could tell them. While NATO AWACS aircraft orbited over Poland and Romania looking at the same airspace, but separated by a wall of interoperability problems. Well, that picture is changing. Sweden donated 2 SOT 340 AEW and C aircraft to Ukraine with the IRI radar system capable of tracking up to 1,000 airborne contacts in ranges approaching about 280 miles. The first of those aircraft appears to have been flown in operational mission over western Ukraine just last month. Ukraine now has eyes overhead. The coverage isn't NATO level yet, but it's no longer nothing, which means the training pipeline in the UK is converging with a real operational capability on the Ukrainian side. They're building towards something coherent. The harder lesson, the one that will shape how historians write about Ukraine's air war a decade from now, is the culture and command shift happening inside that training pipeline. RAF instructors are describing a deliberate break from Soviet-style decision-making. Wing Commander Tom, identified only by his rank and his first name for security reasons, said Ukrainian pilots arrived accustomed to being told where to go and what to do and when to return. In the NATO model, pilots launch, they choose how to accomplish their objectives, they manage the sortie, and they make the calls in real time. That departure is enormous, and it runs deep. Soviet-era airpower was built on centralized control. Pilots executed orders, ground controllers dominated tactical decisions. Individual initiative was tolerated at best and punished at worst. And a military culture that treated bad news like radioactive isotopes wasn't exactly designed to encourage subordinates to improvise under pressure. Western air power runs on a different operating system. U.S. Air Force doctrine describes it as a centralized intent with decentralized execution. Commanders set the objective, the people closest to the fight figure out how to get there. This mirrors a broader difference that has shown up across every domain of this war. The Russian military struggles with NCO culture, the non-commissioned officers who form the backbone of Western forces and who carry the tactical flexibility that no rank structure above them can fully replace. Ukraine built an NCO corps between 2014 and 2022, specifically through NATO training. When Russia burned through its junior officers in the catastrophic early advances of 2022, its command structure fractured. Ukraine adapted. Russia repeated the same mistakes in the next position. Now that logic is entering the cockpit. A pilot launches with a plan. The plan starts aging the moment the wheels leave the runway. A target moves, a threat radar activates, a friendly aborts, weather closes in, communications degrade, GPS gets jammed. The pilot cannot wait for a command post to process all of that and send back the perfect answer. He has to adapt inside the commander's intent right now. That's what Ukrainian pilots are learning, and it's harder than it sounds after years of training that conditioned the instinct to wait for authorization before the next move. But here's the thing, none of this is fast. The RAF pipeline starts with the Grob Tutor Basic Trainer before progressing to the fast jet training and then the F-16 conversion. More than 50 Ukrainian pilots have completed the English language and the elementary flying course. Each one represents years of investment. Combat experienced pilots, who also hold Western tactical doctrine in their heads, are not a resource that scales quickly. And one Ukrainian F-16 pilot was honest enough to say earlier this year that some NATO taught tactics didn't fully fit with the war Ukraine is actually fighting, that Western training was built around different conflicts, and Ukrainian pilots have had to develop their own methods for intercepting cruise missiles, killing strike drones, and operating near the line of contact. That's an honest answer to the just give them F-16s crowd. Jets can be donated, missiles can be manufactured, but the judgment that keeps a pilot alive and combat effective when everything goes wrong at once, well, that takes years. So here's what the whole picture actually points to. Russia can jam GPS across large swaths of contested airspace. It can make the electromagnetic spectrum over Ukraine hostile to the point of unusable. It can fill the sky with radar energy and surface-to-air missiles. What it cannot jam, though, is a trained pilot's judgment, the capacity to keep thinking when the screens start lying, the signals go dark, and the plan from the pre-mission brief bears no resemblance to what's outside the canopy. The UK program isn't just building pilots who can fly an F-16, it's building pilots who can keep fighting when the F-16's most convenient capabilities are stripped away one by one, and who carry 3 years of Ukrainian battlefield knowledge that no classroom anywhere in NATO can replicate. That combination is what Russia is going to be dealing with, and it can't be jammed, suppressed, or spoofed. Ukraine already knows this. The whole war has been a masterclass in taking tools and using them in ways donors never imagined. HIMARS became precision strike scalpels, Storm Shadow became strategic messaging with wings, naval drones turned the Black Sea Fleet into an artificial reef. The F-16 is next, and the most dangerous thing inside it won't be the AIM-120. It'll be the pilot. That's it for today, my friends. Subscribing is the best free way to support what I do here, and it helps human creators. We don't take too kindly to robots around these parts. Otherwise, I'm also over on Substack, where I write 5 times a week if you're feeling froggy. And as always, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Crimea is Ukraine.